Thank you for tuning in to the Dr. John Show. I'm your host, Dr. John, and today we're going to have another discussion on the hot topic of water fluoridation. Over the last couple of weeks, just since my last stream, there has been a new study that has emerged in regards to water fluoridation, and it has raised some controversial views in terms of its effect on your health, specifically your IQ. This study has not gone without attention, and in fact, there's been quite a buzz in the media just over the last couple of weeks. Let's take a look at what some of these media sources have to say in regards to this new study.
This is the New York City tap water that I drink, and for every liter of it, there is 0.8 milligrams of fluoride in it. Fluoride is essential for our oral health, and for about 63% of Americans, it's also why it's in our drinking water. Now someone with a lot of views on public health not supported by science. And one thing he believes is that we should advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water.
I got a real quick question for you. Are you a conspiracy theorist?
That is a pejorative, Senator, that's applied to me, mainly to keep me from asking difficult questions of powerful interests. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said fluoride lowered IQ. Last week, JAMA published a meta-review of 87 studies saying that there's a direct inverse correlation between IQ loss.
All right, so I'm going to assume
I could go on for about a week.
I bet he could. So this JAMA study, which he mentioned at the very end of his Senate hearing, is exactly what we're going to be discussing here today. It has created quite a controversy, and it does have some pretty interesting issues in regards to the effects on IQ and fluoride. And it does fly in the face of current public health policy. Now, just to set the record straight here, the CDC reports that the percent of population served by community water supplies receiving fluoridated water is 72.3% in the US. So I'm not sure where Vox got their source on that, but I tried to take mine from the CDC. So last time I had this discussion on fluoride, and I went into some of the basics behind fluoride as a dental health product, as well as some of the potential health effects of elevated fluoride exposure. And I want to recap that just briefly, just so everybody's on the same page. But first, I'd like to just do some shout outs to some of the comments I received following that stream. So first I received from the Real Joe King 732. Hey, Dr. John, good stuff. In my travels to other countries, I've seen how bad people's teeth can get. The UK folks really have bad teeth with no fluoridation. Just don't overdo the fluoride. So this brings up a pretty interesting point, and I want to just do a little bit of stat checking on that and see really who has the better teeth. I want to compare the US dental health with that of European countries and the UK. And let's just see really who has the better teeth here. And Steph Showdown, thanks for doing the research on this. I must say, when I originally started doing this topic, I had no idea that there was such a rabbit hole involving water fluoridation. And the more I look on it, the more interesting things I find. And that's what I hope to share with you guys during this discussion. Marianne Correll, great job, Dr. John. Very interesting and important question on why more research isn't being done. So I have uncovered some things that may answer this question. I'll hint at that during today's stream, but I would also like to save some of these for a future date as well. Finally, let's see, Dax Johnson. Thank you, John. Continue sharing truth. And I would like to highlight that a lot of this is emerging scientific evidence, but a lot of this research has been conducted and well understood for several decades now. And I would like to bring attention to some of these findings, and I can only do so much. So I would really appreciate if you could share this video with your friends and family. After all, everybody receives water, and water is pretty universal, and fluoride does not discriminate. So please do your part in sharing this video and bring awareness to the people that matter to you most in your life. And finally, I have a comment from Tommy Technetium. I look forward to seeing the new stream. I'm working on an educational article on the chemistry of teeth, so I'm quite interested in this discussion. Thanks for your work here. So those not familiar, Tommy Technetium is a pretty large YouTuber. He has a following of over 500,000 subscribers, and he does chemistry demonstrations, and he has a very excellent channel that goes well beyond the scope of a general chemistry class. So I would encourage you to check out his channel and subscribe to his channel as well. And please subscribe to my channel, because your support means the world to me. I also would like to see his educational article on chemistry. I believe it would be a pretty good one. So with that, let's do a quick recap here of what we covered last time, just so we're all on the same page. So just give me 1 second. I have a brief technical issue. All right, so last time we covered fluoride, how it can be used as a dental health product. So we reviewed that your enamel is made of this crystal compound known as hydroxyapatite, which is also found in your bone structure. And when you brush your teeth with fluoride, yeah, see, this is just give you 1 second here. That's the thing with doing things live. You never know what to expect. Just 1 second. Okay. I think we're good. Let's see. Okay. So hydroxyapatite, it makes up your enamel, and it also is in your bones. And when you brush your teeth with fluoride, it creates a protective crystalline layer over your enamel known as fluoroapatite. And this is where the fluoride is used in your toothpaste to form this compound. Now, the reason why we do this is because if your teeth are exposed to an acid, fluoroapatite is more resilient to acid exposure than that of your base enamel of hydroxyapatite. And what we learned last time, acid plus enamel equals cavity formation. Now, there can be too much of a good thing if you have too much fluorosis develop. If you have too much fluoroapatite develop over your enamel, this results in a condition known as dental fluorosis. Mild conditions incurring white spots over your enamel with more severe reactions causing brownish discoloration. Now, this is aesthetically unpleasing. Severe cases can lead to severe problems with your structural integrity of your teeth. But what's more pernicious is skeletal fluorosis, which is where fluoroapatite actually develops within your bone structure. Mild forms result in joint pain, stiffness, osteosclerosis, but severe conditions lead to bone deformity and fractures. Now, in addition to these conditions, there have been some ongoing studies through the years on fluoride and IQ. I mentioned last time this 2012 meta-analysis by Harvard, where they surveyed different fluoride levels in water supplies and assessed the IQ in communities that had high fluoride levels and communities that had low fluoride levels. And they found that for community water supplies that had fluoride levels between 0.88 to up to 11 had a reduced IQ. And now this is especially concerning because the recommended fluoride levels by the US Public Health Service are at 0.7. And as we saw from last time, there's a margin of error for the control of fluoride in your water system. This error is about 0.2, plus or minus 0.2, around 0.7. So that upper boundary starts hitting on that edge of starting to affect IQ. What's even more alarming is that the World Health Organization's recommendation levels are 1.5, which is into the red zone. And legally enforceable levels here in the US are set at 4 by the Environmental Protection Agency. These are well into the red areas. And what we also learned from last time is that although the recommendation level is at 0.7, there are many public water supplies that have naturally high levels of fluoride that can breach up to levels of 9.8 milligrams per liter and above. So these are some particularly scary results. And from the Harvard study, they mentioned that future research should formally evaluate dose-response relations based on individual level measures of exposure over time. So what this is saying is that in the studies that they surveyed, they merely measured the fluoride levels in the public water supplies, and they assumed that the population all just got their full fluoride exposure from that water system. An individual level measure would be measuring the fluoride level within the individuals themselves and then assessing an IQ based on that. That would be a little bit more of a direct link. We also reviewed a study from last time from the National Toxicology Program, where they reached the same conclusions as the Harvard study and also concluded that more studies are needed to fully understand the potential for lower fluoride exposure to affect children's IQ. So at the end of the last stream, Tommy Technetium brought up a pretty interesting point. He said, "It seems to me there's a pretty fine line between the safe therapeutic dental effect at 0.7 milligrams per liter and onset of neurological issues at 0.8 milligrams per liter. I imagine you've already seen this, but if not, check out this very recent article." And he mentions this JAMA Pediatrics article. So I did see this article a few days before my last stream, and I was considering mentioning it on the last stream, but I wanted to really spend some time with it and make sure I digested the full details before I just threw it out there and assumed its conclusions. So that's what I want to get into here today, is this new research. And so last time I said that since 2012, the total number of US studies on individualistic fluoride exposure and IQ were 0. Well, that's now set to 1-ish. And the reason I say ish is because this study is a meta-analysis. And they do comparative studies that have been taken around the world on individual fluoride exposure measured through the urine of the participants. So we're going to break this down step by step and just see exactly what this study is saying and why there's a bit of a buzz about it. So let's see. From the very beginning, it mentions that in the United States, the CDC estimates that water and processed beverages provide approximately 75% of a person's fluoride intake. And about 40 to 70% of a person's fluoride intake comes from fluoridated drinking water. So that's fairly significant. But an individual's total exposure also reflects contributions from fluoride in other sources, such as food, dental products, industrial emissions, and pharmaceuticals. And if you go to the National Institutes of Health page in the Office of Dietary Supplements, you can see they have a fact sheet on fluoride and sources. And pulling this up, you can see it lists some of the primary food sources that someone can consume that would give them pretty high levels of fluoride. At the top of the list is black tea, where just 1 cup could give you up to 1.5 milligrams of fluoride. So in a lot of in the water fluoridation studies, the metric they use is milligrams per liter, assuming that a person would drink a liter of water and they get this X number of milligrams of fluoride. But if you just drink 1 cup of tea, you can get up to 1.5 milligrams. Or coffee, it says per each 1 cup, you get up to 0.22 milligrams. So if you drink 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day, you're significantly increasing your exposure to fluoride. I put a link to this source sheet in the description, so you can check that out and see which food groups are especially high for fluoride. But moving back to the study, they assessed 74 studies. I think RFK said 80, but it's actually 74 studies. And most were conducted in China. It says 45 were in China, 3 from Canada, 1 from Denmark, 12 from India, 4 from Iran, 4 from Mexico, and some from New Zealand, Pakistan, Spain, and Taiwan. Now, it's important to note, I've noticed sometimes in the media, they present this as there's no studies in the United States in this meta-analysis. And this is a little bit of a misconception, because there are 0 studies on this in the United States. And that's not because they can't do this study in the US, they just simply haven't. So in the United States, we're relying on these meta studies that survey all these studies taken from around the world. That should not downplay the significance of their findings. I just want to make that point clear. Now, they go on. Oh, I got a question from Steph Showdown. Does the fluoride for coffee tea come from the beans or tea leaves themselves? That's a very good question. So yes, so it depends on where they are sourced, but a lot of the plants that receive a lot of the plants, when they're getting their water consumption, they start absorbing the fluoride from the groundwater. So they sort of have a high concentration of the fluoride within the leaf or the bean. So when you brew it, it just kind of comes out into the water itself. So that's a great question. All right. So in these studies, we have 20 of them. So they had 73 studies. 20 of those reported fluoride measured in the urine. So in the other studies, they did the group analysis where they just measured the fluoride in the water and assumed everybody just drank from those water supplies. In 20 of these studies, they actually measured the spot urine of the individuals participating in the IQ studies. And they saw that there was an inverse dose-response association. And this is the alarming part of the study here. Associations remained inverse at all fluoride levels. They had groups that measured 4 milligrams per liter, that had 2 milligrams per liter, and less than 1.5 milligrams per liter of fluoride in the urine. And they all measured an inverse association with IQ. Now, this study actually takes things a step further. They fit a trend line based on the fluoride exposure and the IQ, and they fit a trend line. And their trend line says that the individual level data showed that for each 1 milligram per liter increase in urinary fluoride, this was associated with a decrease in IQ of 1.63 points. And it was a statistically significant decrease. So this shows a pretty strong linkage between lower IQ and fluoride exposure. And just to show you a little bit of how they did this, here's a sample of their studies. Each one of these rows represents a separate study taken from around the world. They have the exposure level of per 1 milligram per liter of urinary fluoride. On the graph at the right, the center line 0, this would represent a no change between fluoride exposure and IQ. Everything on the left, as you can see, all but one study falls on the left, indicating an inverse exposure and IQ. Now, on this beta column here on their chart represents the trend line for each of these studies. And you can kind of get a pooled average result of that, and that's the minus 1.63 correlation. So let's just see what this looks like on the graph. So this is the line. This is the association levels for fluoride exposure and IQ. And if we just try to match this with the current recommendation levels in public health policy, let's just see what this looks like. So for the US Public Health Service at 0.7, this corresponds to an IQ drop on average of minus 1.14. for the WHO's recommendation of 1.5 milligrams per liter, this corresponds to an IQ drop of minus 2.44 points. And then finally, for the EPA's legal limit at 4, this corresponds to an IQ drop of minus 6.52 points. So the researchers, so this is a pretty strong, this is a pretty strong relationship here. It's linear. They tried to fit different curves. They tried to use cubic functions and quadratic. They said a linear is mathematically the most simple model that fit the data. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, okay, at 0.7 minus 1.14 IQ points, what's the big deal in this? Well, the researchers acknowledge this. And they say, although the estimated decrease in IQ found in the regression slopes may seem small, a 1.63 IQ points per 1 milligram per liter increase in urinary fluoride, research on other neurotoxicants has shown that subtle shifts in IQ at the population level can affect people who fall within the high and low ranges of the population's IQ distribution. And they go on to say, for example, a 5-point decrease in a population's IQ would nearly double the number of people classified as intellectually disabled. So I'm gonna try to spell this point out a little bit to show you exactly what they mean. So let's look at a chart of the IQ of a population. Now, for a healthy, normal population, this is the distribution. So the way you can interpret this is that the average IQ for a population centers around 100, and that 68% of the population fall within plus or minus 15 points of 100. That ranges from 85 to 115. And it is clinically diagnosable as intellectually disabled for people that fall below an IQ of 70. And statistically, hi, Joe King. Hi, Dr. John. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you joining the discussion. So statistically here, this represents a 2.3% of the population is below 70 and below. Now, what happens if this IQ distribution gets shifted? If you drop IQ points of 5 points, this shifts the distribution curve to the left by 5 points. So now the median is now at 95. But now look at the distribution now that's 70 and below. This now represents 4.8% of the population. This is an increase of 110% of intellectually disabled individuals. And this is why this is pretty concerning. So, I'm sorry, I just saw this comment. Does fluoride dumb you down enough to think the Earth is flat? I'm not going to make any clarifications on that, but it might explain a few things. So this is pretty concerning, actually. So what we have, and what they go on to say here in this study, is that there are regions of the US, and this is what we sort of saw in last stream. There are regions in the United States where the community water supplies and private wells contain natural fluoride concentrations greater than 1.5 milligrams per liter, serving more than 2.9 million US residents. And in addition, the US Geological Survey estimates that 172,000 US residents are served by domestic wells that exceed EPA's enforceable standard of 4 milligrams per liter fluoride in drinking water. And over 500,000 are served by domestic wells that exceed the non-enforceable standard of 2 milligrams per liter. So I just wanted to spell this detail out and perhaps say the quiet part out loud. Using this data, these populations and these fluoride concentrations, which are from the US Geological Survey, which I've actually double-checked the facts on this. This checks out. This means that for the 2.9 million people that are served in the fluoride areas of 1.5 milligrams per liter, their average IQ drops by 2.44. This results in a net gain of individuals below the IQ of 70 of 30,000. For the fluoride level of 2 milligrams per liter, serving populations of just over 500,000. This results in a median and a mean drop in IQ of 3.26, which for the individuals following the net gain of intellectually disabled individuals, this results in 7.6 thousand people. And for the community, the 172,000 that are served with 4 milligrams per liter, this results in an IQ drop of minus 6.52, resulting in a net gain of intellectually disabled individuals of 6.2 thousand. So you can see that this is starting to be kind of concerning. And at what cost is fluoride in the water really doing, in addition to just preventing cavities? The study concludes that these results may inform future comprehensive public health risk-benefit assessments of fluoride. Well, I certainly hope so. And you may be asking, taken together, these studies, such as the ones from Harvard, the National Toxicology Program, and now JAMA Pediatrics, how is the Environmental Protection Agency responding to these studies to adjust these regulatory measures? Well, the short and thin of it is they have been taken to court. Now, when I originally did this, when I was originally organizing this topic, I thought that the court case would just be an interesting side note and something I wanted to talk about. And in digging into it, it actually raises many red flags, and there are surprising twists and turns within this court case that really sheds light on what happens when emerging scientific details and studies start disagreeing with the going public health policy. So this court case, which has been now ongoing for 9 years, is a little bit disturbing, and it deserves its own video in its own right. So I've been going through some of the details. I want to talk about this in my next stream. So make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss that, because this court case really is not talked about in the media very much, but more people need to be aware of what's really going on. And it's amazing. It goes all the way up to the highest levels of government. So there's a lot of attention on water fluoridation, even if you don't hear about it as much in the media. So I'm going to take a segue from this, and I would like to just briefly talk on a few comments from the last stream regarding statistics on dental cavity rates. So someone brought up from the last time a SDRTCACGNRJRC brought up an interesting comment. He said, I grew up in Ireland with fluoridation and live in Germany without fluoridation. Anecdotally, I can say teeth health in Germany is very good. They have a very good health service, which I guess makes a difference to how things look. Would be interesting to find good statistics. I haven't used fluoride myself in 30-odd years. And the Real Joe King 3732 follows up and says, Hawaii also does not fluoridate its water. I do make it a point when going to the dentist, when they ask if I want some fluoride, I say no. We can get enough in the water and toothpaste and mouthwash. So this brings up a interesting point, because one of the arguments for water fluoridation is all the dental health benefits. In fact, this is the main argument for keeping the water fluoridated in the United States. It's very actively promoted that without water fluoridation, the cavity rates would just skyrocket. Well, I wanted to look into this and maybe see what the statistics have to say about this. So I wanted to look into the decay rates of the USA versus Europe. Now, as we just saw, that Germany does not fluoridate their water. And before going into this, actually, I didn't know which countries in Europe fluoridate and don't fluoridate. I'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's just look up just the numbers of cavity rates. How do they compare? And to do this, we have to use an index known as the DMFT index. This is the common index used in dental surveys to analyze how populations perform dental health-wise. The DMFT is an acronym. It stands for decay, missing, filled, teeth. Okay, so it's very straightforward to calculate, and I'll go into that in a second. So basically, how to calculate this. You can calculate this for an individual, and to do this, you have a patient, and you count up how many decayed teeth they have, or cavities. So for this example, just one. You count up how many missing teeth they have. In this case, 0. You count up how many filled teeth they have. So these are teeth that had previously had cavities that are now filled. And then you just add these up. So this individual would have a DMFT index of 4. Now, the max number of teeth considered in this, they do not consider the third molar or the wisdom teeth. So the max score you can get is 28. And obviously, the higher number you have, the worse your dental health is. So you calculate this for each individual, and then you add them all up and get an average for the population. And this average of DMFT index for a population gives a pretty good indicator of how that population's dental health is. So with this in mind, we can look at the DMFT index of the countries of Europe. And this data was obtained by the World Health Organization. They ran a survey back in 2020 for 12-year-olds. And the 12-year-olds, that's a good measure of dental health because they have most of their permanent teeth in, and they aren't exposed to some of the environmental ailments of teeth, such as coffee, alcohol, cigarettes, etc. So this is a pretty good measure of just how a population's teeth actually is. So in 2020, in 12-year-olds, the countries that scored the best, we have at the top of the chart is Denmark with an average DMFT index of 0.4. Next, we have Germany and United Kingdom at 0.5. So it seems like the people's teeth in the UK are actually pretty good. And next, we have ranked number 3, a tie of Sweden and Finland at 0.7. And finally, at number 4 is the Netherlands at 0.8. And at 5, we have Belgium at 0.9. And then at the bottom of this list in Europe, the bottom 5, we have at number 15, Romania at 2.7. And this is Estonia is tied at 15, 2.7. We have Poland at 2.8, Bulgaria at 3, Latvia at 3.4, Croatia 4.2, and finally Slovakia at 5.1. So an interesting question now. And again, we haven't talked about fluoridation. We're just looking at dental statistics here. Okay. We'll get into fluoridation in a second. But how does the US stack up? Well, looking at the oral health surveillance report given out by the CDC, which was conducted between 2017 and March of 2020, at the same time frame, we can look up the ages of 9 to 11. They have the DMFT average from 9 to 11-year-olds and 12 to 15-year-olds, range from 2.1 to 3.5. We can take a weighted average of this, and this gives a DMFT index of 2.9 for 12-year-olds in the US. So where does that stack up on this list in the European nations? Well, nowhere on the top 5. In fact, the US ranks just between Poland and Bulgaria. So the US would be 17th on this list at 2.9. Now, an interesting question. Of these nations, who fluoridates their water? Well, in the top 5, the UK is the only country that fluoridates their water, and they only fluoridate 10% of their water supply. So the majority of UK doesn't actually fluoridate their water. And none of the other countries do. And in fact, of all the countries on the list, the only ones that fluoridate as much as the US is Ireland at 73%. Spain also fluoridates just 10% of their population, and they rank at number 6. So you can see the US, for all the promise of fluoridation, we are still well behind on dental health compared to the Europe and United Kingdom. In fact, of all of Europe, of the entire population of Europe, only 2% of that population receives fluoridated water. So you may be asking yourself, well, maybe the Europeans just aren't with the times. Maybe they just have ignored this public health policy, and they just go about in blissful ignorance of the promise of water fluoridation. But this actually is not the case. So an interesting story is that in the year 1999 to 2000, there was a US public health official by the name of Eugene Albright. And he wrote letters to the various countries of the European Union at that time. And he wanted to ask about their status of water fluoridation, whether they were fluoridating their water, and what their opinions were on the matter. And I've been able to attain some of these response letters, and I think their responses are pretty illuminating on their thoughts on the matter. So let's see. The first letter I have came from Austria. This is, again, he wrote letters to these countries. These are the responses. So from Austria, dear Mr. Albright, referring to your letter, we'd like to inform you that toxic fluorides have never been added to the public water supplies in Austria. Now he wrote a letter to Belgium. And he said, this water treatment, the response from Belgium, this water treatment has never been of use in Belgium and will never be. We hope so into the future. The main reason is that this is the fundamental position of the drinking water sector is that it's not its task to deliver medicinal treatment to people. That's a very good point. Okay, I'm sorry. This is another letter from Denmark. Remember, Denmark had the best dental health of all the European nations. From the Danish Embassy, we are pleased to inform you that according to the Danish Ministry of Environment and Energy, toxic fluorides have never been added to the public water supplies in Denmark. Consequently, no Danish city has ever been fluoridated. A response letter from France. Okay, according to this report, to our report, our public health policy on water fluoridation related to chemicals and other compounds used for drinking water treatment processes, fluoride chemicals are not included in that list. This is due to ethical as well as medical considerations. And finally, just one more here. A letter from Germany. It said, generally in Germany, fluoridation of drinking water is forbidden. The argumentation of the Federal Ministry of Health against a general permission of fluoridation of drinking water is the problematic nature of compulsion medication and the problem of fluoride containing wastewater, as more than 99% of the used fluorides will get into the water. Essentially, they're saying that of the fluoridated water, it's not all being consumed, and in fact, most of it is getting flushed back into the wastewater and into the surrounding environment. So just having these letters in hand, it's pretty clear the stance of most of Europe on the idea of water fluoridation. It's not from a lack of awareness. They're very well aware of some of the potential health concerns in fluoridating water. To use an often overused quote, I believe that the US is on the wrong side of history on this one. And I think that you're going to be hearing a lot more about water fluoridation in the coming months and years. So this is primarily some of the new stuff I wanted to talk about in today's stream. If there's any questions or comments, maybe I noticed there was a few more going down. Steph Showdown, maybe Americans are too reliant on the fluoridation and not brushing their teeth enough. So yes, so that's a good point. A lot of Americans should not just rely on water fluoridation as the primary defense against cavities. And this topic is not to spite fluoridation in toothpaste. So of the European countries, although they do not fluoridate their water, almost all the countries in Europe actively use fluoride in their toothpaste. It's just a concern when you start ingesting too much fluoride, and that's when you get some of these health complications and potential health effects in your brain. So with that, is there any more questions or comments? All right. Well, I thank you so much for watching and tuning in. This has been a pretty interesting conversation, and make sure to subscribe to my channel, Dr. John Dev, and you can also follow me on X, drjohn_dev. If you'd like to take your support to the next level, I encourage you to buy me a coffee, linked in the description below. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Take care.